To look at Will Smith now, he does not look the same age, I'm doing air quotes there for people listening, as Uncle Phil did in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
I think social media is your friend here because they finally found older people that are more role modelling.
So it reassures me that one day when there is a need for wrestling trivia, I will be all over it.
You should apply for Mastermind. You should apply for it.
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm annoying him.
So you have definitely annoyed him.
Inspiration Nation, hello, Lee Kemp here for another week on the podcast, as always with my very good friends Jose Noya and a mostly recovered Brian Boniface. How are we doing this week, guys?
Yeah, not bad, thank you, Lee.
Yes, good, thanks, Lee.
Ryan confessed to us just before we start the podcast that he cannot remember a single thing from last week. So Ryan, we do thank you not only for being available for the show.
To have admitted, I guess it's pretty bad.
Oh, it's just that's how ill you were, but you powered through. But also, we had a few technical snafus last week, which we normally don't suffer with. So normally, this is just a straight through record. The editing is a lot easier than it was in the olden days when me and Joe would start every 2 minutes. So last week, you had to edit together the show as well when you were feeling like that. So huge appreciation, my friend.
Yeah. And it was good, the edit as well. It was good. Even when I looked at the video, when I looked back, that's stitched together pretty well there. Well done, Ryan. It's fantastic. That's good.
Speaking of appreciation, we thank everyone out there for listening. Follow us on social media at ListenToin, ListenToin, and of course you get us across all podcast platforms and on YouTube if you just search for Jose Noya. He is the man, or throw in Inspiration Nation. Either one of those work. So this week, conversations, it is down to me. I promised you guys a few weeks ago that when my next conversation comes around, that we would talk about wrestling, and we are talking about wrestling.
Okay, wrestling it is.
As I've referenced a few times, this is my passion in life. If I had a mastermind subject, that would be wrestling. In fact, by pure coincidence, I mentioned going to a wrestling show on a meeting today, and someone's like, "Oh, I used to watch that," and they reeled off a load of names to me, and it's like, "Oh no, they're dead, or they're doing this now." Everyone they mentioned, I had a little fact to throw out, so it reassures me that one day when there is a need for wrestling trivia, I will be all over it.
You should apply for Mastermind. You should apply for it.
Yeah.
I've convinced you to get glasses, so that's the next one.
This is next. Yeah, that only took, like 3 years?
3 years, yeah.
And you've noticed I'm not actually wearing, I forgot to wear them all day today as well, so it's wearing off.
But eventually you'll be like, "Oh, this is really annoying. I can see with my glasses," and you will put them back on.
Hold on, they're here. I'll put them on. I will put them on for you.
He actually has got them. Ryan, it has worked. You've done it.
It's sat next to my monitor, so I don't forget. There we go. Right. So, and when I say we're talking about wrestling, we're kind of talking about wrestling. I know this is my passion in life. You two, not so much, but it's a framing device for something. So I'm wearing today, you can see, this is my ad-free shows t-shirt. So I'm going rogue and I'm promoting another podcast network. This is my favored listen to whatever I'm doing. Fantastic things going on over there. Hosted by a guy called Conrad, who is my podcast hero, and I one day hope to be as good a podcast host as he is. He inspired many things, such as the Google machine that, Joe, you love when I reference that. But for my backdrop for wrestling, one of the things that gets mentioned quite a lot on the shows, and it's just kind of put an idea in my head that I've whirled around more and more and more and more and more. And I think it'll be really good for us to talk about it, especially with the difference in our ages, because we're kind of 10 years apart either way. All right, 15 down the line, 10 up the line, but we're all kind of a generation apart, if you like. So it'll be good to test this theory, if you like. So the thing that always gets referenced and has turned into a bit of jokes on the show is back in the mid-90s, in my first round of watching wrestling, there was a guy called Jake the Snake Roberts. Don't know if either of you are familiar with Jake the Snake.
No.
Superb wrestler, one of the best minds ever in the wrestling business. However, he left and then came back in the mid-90s in the WWF that I watched. And a big part of the storyline that he was in was basically that he was a has-been from a bygone era and shouldn't be there anymore. And that got referenced a lot, like, what's this old man doing here? Why is he still wrestling? He's so out of shape. Why is he still doing this? Yada, 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 yada. And that was a frame for the story, because his kind of heyday was in the late 80s, if you like. This was the mid-90s now. At that time, he was 41 years old, which was considered over the hill, shall we say. And there's lots of examples of this. Hulk Hogan, you must know Hulk Hogan. He left one promotion, went to another one, and he was basically, there's a whole advertising campaign, if you like, talking about how he was over the hill. And there was a guy in the early 90s by the name of Ric Flair. I don't know if you know him or not, greatest wrestler of all time. And he was a focal point of the company, and they actually decided to move away from him because they wanted to go for a youth movement. Again, early 40s. There's a wrestler today who is considered by many to be the greatest wrestler in the world, if not one of the greatest wrestlers in the world.
I guess.
What's that?
Can I guess?
You can guess.
Is it The Undertaker?
It's not The Undertaker.
Oh.
I remember him though. I know The Undertaker. That one, big rimmed hat, dark clothing, right?
Well
The Undertaker,
yes.
right?
But he died, didn't he? And then all of a sudden he just came back. Well, hence why they called him The Undertaker, right? But
they're slightly inaccurate. And for any of my wrestling fans that are listening, I will correct Ryan on the backstory once we're done with this, but he's going to take us too far off track.
I'm glad I'm annoying him. I'm glad I'm annoying him.
So,
you have definitely annoyed him.
AJ Styles is his name. And 3 years ago, maybe, where are we? 2022, 2019, 18. Yeah, kind of 16, 17, 18, 19. He was well in his prime. Was the champion of the company, WWE champion, focal point of the company, storylines built around him, fantastic shape. 2018, he was 41 years old. Not over the hill, not questioned he's over the hill, not looking like he's over the hill, 41 years old. In fact, on the active roster right now, Wrestlemania is coming up, biggest show of the year. The main event is Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar. I really hope Roman Reigns wins. They've done a brilliant job building him. But Brock Lesnar, who's opponent, unquestionably one of the top wrestlers in the world right now. He's currently the champion. I don't think anyone would question it if he did win, even though that I hope doesn't happen. He is 44, 45 years old, I'm going to say. In fantastic shape. In fact, make sure I've got it right, of course. He is, 45 at the moment, I think, or 44, certainly in that age bracket. And there are actually a number of top flight performers on the roster in their mid-40s. There's a guy in another company called Chris Jericho, who's one of my favourites right now, fully active performer, probably in the best shape he's ever been in his life. He is 51 years old. The oldest active wrestler right now on the main national, international scene is currently 62 years old and took a dive through a table about 2 weeks ago. So my point on all this, I suppose, is, and this is where the thing goes on the conversation, is it was very much the standard that by the time you hit your 40s, you're over hill mid-90s, whereas now in the 10s into the 20s, that's arguably where people are hitting their prime. Another wrestler right now, if you saw him, he's probably at the early start of his prime. Finn Balor's in his name. He's in his early 40s as well. Loads of people in that bracket. So my point on this, because this gets pointed out, said on this podcast, which is hosted by and generally listened to people who are in my age range, because it's about nostalgia from that time. We all look at the same thing. A lot of the people will have the same perspective on life that I do. And I don't know if there's something now that basically, like I used to joke, 50's the new 40, 60's the new 50, or the other way around, blah, 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 blah. Is age changing? Are we younger for longer? Are people in their 40s now the same as people were in their 30s 20 years ago? And I don't know if I think yes, but I don't know if that's because I'm of that age and my lens on the world fits my age, or whether that's genuinely a thing. Joe, you're older than me, so you might have a different view on that. Ryan, you are 26, I'm going to say. Yeah. And I don't know if that's different for you. Another perspective, to take it out of wrestling into pop culture. Will Smith. Will Smith is the same age now that Uncle Phil was as a character in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air in the mid-90s. But I can't reconcile in my head. If I was to look at Will Smith now, he does not look the same age, I'm doing air quotes there for people listening, as Uncle Phil did in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
But is that because at the time you had almost an unconscious bias of what you thought Uncle Phil's age was and how he should be looked, how he should have.
And that's, I suppose, that's part of my question: is this real, or is this just a phenomenon that as you get older, your perspective on age changes?
I think the latter is true, because if you'd asked me 10 years ago if Lee at 41 was over the hill, yeah, of course he would be. Put him in a retirement home. But now I'm 26, like that's not too far away, you know. I'm as close to your age as I was starting school. I think he's close. He's pretty close. Yeah, I'm pretty much at the midpoint between your age and the age I started school, secondary school. So yeah, it's weird, isn't it? I think as a child, you're always told, and as a young person, you're always told, "Oh, you're so young. Don't worry. You two do it all the time. You've got years and years ahead of you. Do it all the time." But I'm at an age now where I'm going to have to start saying that to people, because you know, at 26, a couple of years' time, I'm going to start seeing people 10 years younger than me in pubs and stuff. I'm going to be like, "Oh, you're so young. Don't worry about it." And that's going to be. That's going to be it, you know. That I'm in a way, I'm older than 25, so I'm already over the hill, right? In some respects, to some elements, I'm already considering that.
You kids of today, you got no idea, Ryan.
I'm already considering
in your prime, Ryan.
Going to the pub twice a week is probably a bit excessive, and I should probably start saving for a house and start doing things like that. That's currently where I now sit in this. So. That, you know, in some ways, yes. Do I think that 50 is the new 40 and 60 is the new 50, as you kind of mentioned? No, but I think it will be. I just think how television and how the public viewed people of that age in the mid-90s and when these things were happening was different. And I think the perception of things has changed. You have a lot older, idealistic people. Right? Wasn't Barack Obama?
Sorry to cut in, but is that a perception, or was that a mirror of reality? Was that, you know, that portrayal of someone in their 60s in 1995, was that a perception or was that reality? And actually, it's now changed.
No, I think it was a perception, because there's now more. I think media sold everyone a dream. Media sold everyone a dream that if you weren't Bobby Ewing and was 25 reappearing in the shower, then you're no one.
That is right? A brilliant callback, Ryan, by the way. My
Thank
God.
You. Like you're
bloody in hell.
You're a no one, right? If you're not I suppose thinking about it, I've got a second question. How old was John Travolta in Grease?
Let me look that up for you for 1 second.
Because to me, I remember watching Grease and thinking, "Cool, this guy looks well old." But I would.
Well, this is it. How old was he? Or how old was his character?
That's the question. Oh, okay. Both. Could be both.
Grease. Here we go. We're doing the maths here now. When did the film come out?
I'll do John Travolta's age.
1978 was when the film came out.
Oh, he must have been really young then. 54. So he was 24 years old.
Yes.
And they were high school kids.
Yes.
So whenever I see that film back, or whenever I did, because I've not watched it for years and years and years and years, but whenever I watched that back, I always thought that he didn't look right playing somebody of that age.
Which was an accurate statement.
Yeah, it was, but he was only 24. The way I envisage it right now, being I've not seen it for 15, 20 years, is that I thought he was in his 40s. And that the film came out in the mid-80s, early 90s. So obviously it didn't, and it came out, as you just said, in 78 or whatever it was. But that's how I perceived it based off of what I was shown at the time. And I think social media is your friend here, because they've finally found older people that are more role model-y. Like Barack Obama, I think, was in his 50s or near his 50s when he ended his presidency. And he looked really young. There's also been a sharp rise in cosmetic procedures, and it wouldn't surprise me if Will Smith had a couple that makes him look a bit more youthful than maybe what he is.
Don't say that. He will slap you upside your head.
That's only if I talk about his missus. But I also think that, and again, this might be based off of my perception of that time, celebrities in the 80s and 90s were living much poorer lifestyles than maybe some are now.
And that was going to be one of my points, is that if we think there's any reality in this, how much, and not just celebrities is a good backdrop, but for all of us, how much does lifestyle possibly play a part in this? And coming back to my wrestling framing to start this, wrestlers, particularly in the 80s and 90s, lived like rock stars. They were out partying every night and all the things that come with that. They were on the road 300 days a year, enormous wear and tear mentally and physically.
Yeah.
And there was probably the early 2000s, and I'm going to say 2004, 2005, the amount of wrestlers that died below the age of 50 was, if a week went by where there wasn't one, it was shocking. And we're now talking about people hitting their prime in their 40s into their 50s. And the same then for, people in bands and TV, film, everything like that, is how much does that play a part? But then also, and I was thinking about this, when I was of the age to start going out, it may or may not have been a little bit before 18, shall we say, but certainly 18, I would be out with my mates and we'd go out drinking, and we'd go out on a Thursday, a Friday, a Saturday, Sunday, a Monday, Tuesday. I worked in hospitality at the time. It's kind of the done thing. We were out a lot, even for people that went out 2 or 3 times a week. And there was a lot less than there is now. Online gaming wasn't a thing. Streaming wasn't a thing. You kind of going out you were the exception if you didn't head out drinking on the weekend, basically, which I think is less prevalent now than it was then. But also smoking, there was no rules on smoking. So inside the pub, inside the clubs. And again, smoking now is more of a fringe thing, whereas you were uncool if you didn't smoke. I was uncool. I didn't smoke, but it was a done thing. When I first started my first job, more people smoked than didn't. And whilst I didn't smoke, every night I would come home, throw my clothes on the floor, get into bed, wake up in some awful state the next morning, and my clothes would stink of smoke. I'd get in the shower, and as soon as the water hit my hair, the smell of smoke as it came off of me was horrendous. And I'd been breathing that in all night.
So you may as well have actually been smoking.
Absolutely. And chain smoking as well, because it was everyone would have gone through this multiple nights of the week. And we generally as consumers, we expect a lot more in the quality of our food. We're more aware of how we eat. There's lots of stuff like that as well, where I think if there is reality on people being physically fitter later than they were before, a lot of these kind of social things really play into that as well.
Yeah. I'm a caveat, I think, myself personally, to this going out rule, because I don't get hangovers. So I could do it Monday through Sunday still and not have a problem with it. I just think that it isn't the sensible option anymore. At my age as it is anyway. But I think there are just a lot more older role models now. Like you look at sport. Like you look at sport. Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal are in their 40s, or at least I think Federer is, but Nadal may be close. And Nadal won a Grand Slam this year. And
tying back to, is this again part of the physical movement on that people can play at that level at that age? Sorry, go on, mate.
I was gonna say, I think science has just moved. Also, I think science has shifted quite a lot in the last 30 or 40 years, that modern medicine kind of allows people to compete at higher levels for longer. Cristiano Ronaldo, I think, is 34, 35. Messi's 33, 34. And that's where you start seeing people drop off. But they've not had great years, for those of you that are football fans. But I don't think they're dropping off in the same way that normal footballers would drop off.
I remember way back, and this is even before Championship Manager, Joe, in the mid-90s, there was a game on the Amiga that I used to play with my dad called The Manager. And you, other than goalkeepers, you wouldn't keep players over the age of 31. That was over the hill, done and dusted, on the scrap heap. And like you said, that's pushing on as well. Quick example as well before I stop my rambles, but Jennifer Aniston, another example, looks and again, surgery may or may not be a part, but looks as good now as she did in Friends in the mid-90s. She is currently 53 years old.
Yeah.
And I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that when I was in the mid-90s, there was no one 53 years old that looks like Jennifer Aniston does now.
I think surgery has more to play with that than maybe what you're giving credit for. But yes. I just think sport's a big one to kind of look at, because that's, you know, it's pretty popular.
Yeah.
But there are older movie stars now than what there were. I'm pretty sure Daniel Craig was the oldest Bond as a starter, as doing the first one. I think he was the oldest Bond that they had.
Yes, I think you're right about that.
Or if he wasn't, he was very close to being. I mean, musicians. I mean, I think they just lead different lives. Like Ed Sheeran, I think, is vegan. And I think he would be able to do so much more than maybe what the Gallagher brothers did 20, 30 years ago, and have much more longevity in terms of touring and stuff. They also had their own issues that stopped them making music and whatever. And that's obviously a completely different conversation. But I've got no doubt that the lifestyles they led, in comparison to people like Ed Sheeran, who do look after themselves a bit better, would mean that people like Ed Sheeran will be able to do it for a lot longer than the Gallagher brothers would have been able to. Excuse me. I just think, I also think there's a part of it that Lee, you're of an age now that you were approximately my age when social media was probably starting to kick off as a thing, maybe a little bit younger than me. So you're now the first middle-aged group of people that have experienced social media. Therefore, from your perspective, people all over the world are clinging on to their youth and looking for those role models of an age that's similar to yours. So I also think there's a lot more of that as well. But you also hear about more. Like you hear about more things because of social media. Like 30 years ago, you wouldn't hear of some 50-year-old climbing Mount Everest. I'm not sure if one has recently, or if ever has. I'm sure there probably has been. But now you would see it on Twitter, or you would get a Sky News notification after the oldest person ever has climbed Mount Everest. You'd be like, oh, fucking hell. Sorry, I swore. Oh, bloody hell. That, you know,
I've got to tick that box again for the second week in a row.
Sorry. But you've then been able to ascertain, right, that you're now getting more information that older people are doing other things, whereas before that wouldn't have mattered. You wouldn't have heard about it. You would have heard about the war in Germany coming down 30 years ago. Is that 31 years ago now? But I know that's a huge differential, but I just think the smaller bits of news that aren't really news are now becoming news like that are helping, that is helping this argument. Yeah, I've spoken a lot on that. Joe has not.
No, it's good. I like your view on it. Well, this is over to Joe, because obviously you're the other way, so you're 10 years older than I am, and I don't know what your perception is as to, you know, age has changed or not changed as you've got older.
And I agree with both of you that it's both, because when I was 18, when I was starting work, I thought people who were 30 were old. Like, I look at them and think, I'm never going to get to that age. I don't know why.
To be fair, Joe, when you were 18, 30 was the life expectancy, so they were old.
Thanks, Adler. Yeah. So, yeah. But yeah, so I think it's both. I think, you know, Ryan's touched some really good points about, I think, social media. You know, you're more aware that people do things when they're older. Like Ronaldo, I actually wrote, before you wrote Ronaldo, Ryan, I actually wrote Ronaldo down here. Like, he's like an example of, he's still playing Premiership football at whatever age he is now. I don't know how old he is now, but, you know, he's still playing at the top level. And, you know, the tennis players, you said, are still playing top level. So definitely science, definitely diet, quality of food, I think, has definitely helped. Gary Vee talks about age a lot. He talks about, well, if you're 60, you've still got 20 years left. So it's not too late to start.
As a side note, I recently found Gary Vee's Instagram, and my goodness, is that a place to be? There's just consistent videos of him telling people to better themselves. Yeah. But inspiring, right? There was a CEO I saw interviewed. He was 90 years old, he's starting in a company. Like, there's all these sort of things you sort of see. And remember Roger Bannister,
he did the 3-minute mile, and no one believed that would be possible until he ran the was it 3-minute mile? It's a 3-minute mile, right? Is it 3 minutes?
It was,
Can't
yeah.
remember. But before that, people believed that actually you drop down and die if you try to do it. Now there's people that have done it, and people continue to do it. So I think it's all about beliefs and where people believe they can do things at certain ages. David Goggins, people like that doing these endurance races, all that sort of thing. People a lot older are accomplishing, like you said, Ryan, are accomplishing things that people didn't think were possible. And I think that people gives people encouragement and change their belief system in their heads about what things can be done. So yeah, I think it's really inspiring. To be fair, when you see people of your age,
so we don't get fact checked, Joe. It was the 4-minute mile, not the 3-minute mile.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah,
I did think it was the 4-minute mile, but I didn't know enough.
Yeah,
I
wasn't sure. Yeah,
don't want to fall foul of the Wikipedia police.
Yeah, thanks for that. But yeah, so it is about belief, and I think when people say, "Oh, I'm too old to do that," there can be a little bit of that because there may be a physical element to it, but there is a strong belief. And I've seen people that are relatively young, and they've said, "Oh, I'm too old to do that," but then because of the belief system. So it's just really important to understand that your beliefs dictate what you can and can't achieve. Of course, there are physical things that when you get to a certain age, but depending if your health is good, there's much better chance of you doing it because people have actually proved that you can still do it. It's all about belief, whether you can. So massive, massive changes in the way we think about age, in fact. And I think it's culture, and I think the internet had a massive, massive part to play in respect to what you said. So that's my take on it. I was definitely changing my views over the years. People retire, but still go and do, well, they say they retire, but they don't really retire. They go on working or whatever, or do what they want to do. But belief's huge. So I think it's belief. And that's been changing over the course of the generations when I've been growing up. So over the hill at 30, it's no longer that, is it? Because you've got Ronaldo, people playing at very high levels beyond that age. So that's my take on it. So yeah,
I've got a further discussion point on it, if you like. And I know we're slowly starting to run out of time, but there's for my snooker fans out there, you'll know about the class of '92, and the pair of you should know most of the people in this list. But it was a year where Ronnie O'Sullivan, John Higgins, Mark Williams, Joe Perry, and Graham Dott, I think, all turned professional. All right, and over those years, Ronnie O'Sullivan's won the most ranking events of all time. John Higgins is a 4-time world champion. Mark Williams is a 3-time world champion. Graham Dott's a world champion. Joe Perry's won events and stuff. And they all come about at the same time. And snooker has always been an aged sport. Stephen Hendry, I think, retired early in his 30s, just for context. These guys turned professional at 17, 18, 30 years ago this year. So that gives you a scale of their age. That would put them at 47, 48 for the most part. So they've played, some of them, 15, 16 years, I think, if I've got my Stephen Hendry fact right, longer than he ever did. And he blew the world of snooker up right after Steve Davis. He was the flag boy for a while. And people were talking, and people had been talking quite recently about why they've been able to show this longevity in the same way that Nadal and Federer has, and Ronaldo and Messi have, and all these other sportsmen. Tiger Woods, I think, didn't Tiger Woods win an event last year or the year before, and he's in his 40s now. So it happens all over the shop of sport. And something that somebody kind of put in my head was that social media has shown people that there's such a more diverse world of things to be doing. So why people were considered at 40 over the hill in Wrestling League was probably because there were a lot of people a lot younger than them that were ready to burst into the scene. Potentially, you would think that.
And I think there could be some truth in that. Yeah,
I think generally speaking, younger, more attractive people will be commercially better for sports and entities than more middle-aged kind of people that have done their time. Right, a fresh new
why
person.
My thumbnails do better on social media than Joe's thumbnails.
Yeah, but for some reason not mine. So I think that might be a me problem. But
it's still attractive still plays a part, even if not age, Ryan.
But somebody said that there's now with social media a whole plethora of things people weren't aware of. You would have watched wrestling in the 80s and 90s and thought, cool, I want to be a wrestler. Whereas somebody growing up now will have YouTubers, actors, streamers, video game players, competitive first-person shooters. They have this whole plethora of other world of things that are now exist because of the technological era. That now means there are less people that want to be wrestlers, as in this example. There are less people that want to be snooker players in this example. There's people that want to be everything. And therefore, older people are having this longevity because there's nobody coming up behind them that's younger and fresher and fitter that wants to get in. Or at least it's scaled down so much because there is a wider verse of things. And that point could be challenged on the fact there are now more people in the world than there were then. So the levels should.
I think that's a really interesting perspective.
But there's now a lot more things people can do than they could. There's now a lot more jobs, hobbies, and things people can do than what there were 25, 30 years ago.
Things that are monetized now that wouldn't have or just didn't exist.
Yeah.
People make money opening toy boxes now. That's how.
I mean, you can go as far as radio presenters, jobs in IT. I know IT existed 25, 30 years ago, but not on the scale it does now. Financial services is a bit different now. As I've said, YouTubers, streamers, people that open toy boxes, people that play video games for a living, people that competitively play video games, driving instructors is probably going to be a lot higher now because there's more cars on the road and more people. There's, I'm just spouting things off here, but the world of everything is just, it was here 30 years ago, it's like here now. And in another 30 years, it'll be here. And in another 30 years, it'll be here. And then people in 90 years' time will go, cool, wrestling was a thing in 1994? What is that?
Wrestling will always be a thing.
But yes, it will. But the group of people interested will become smaller, right? In everything in the world, that group of people will become smaller because there's now more. So
yeah. And you see that there's, even, you look at things like TV, this TV ratings for wrestling gets discussed a lot. And it's not just for that, but the amount of people that's considered a success in watching a show now is a fraction of what would have been a success 10, 20, 30 years ago, because not only have you got your channels, which is probably the lowest thing, but you've got streaming services, you've got YouTube, you've got online gaming, which is, I remember Netflix describing Fortnite as a competitor to them, for example, because it was just eating up people's time. You're right. There's so many different places to spend your time now.
Yeah. And as another example, and it's another snooker one, but wasn't the 1985 World Final the most watched sporting event of all time with 30 million people when Dennis Taylor beat Steve Davis on that weird black ball?
Oh, I remember that. Oh, I actually did watch that myself. Yeah.
I think that was watched by something like 25 million people, and it was the biggest sporting event watched in the UK ever. If you said that 25 million people watched the Super Bowl, they'd go, that's pitiful. It should be a billion people. And it's just, things just exponentially grow, right? And they have in the last 30 years.
Yes, they have. I know it's a countdown time are going, so I'm going to say thank you guys for indulging me on this. I say it's in a good way. There isn't an answer on this. It's just a concept that's in my head, and I keep assessing it. And it's, like I said, I think both are true to an extent that there are, for all the reasons we discussed, we are younger for longer. But also it's as I get older, how much is that perception? It's a whole different subject, but it's, 10 years to me now isn't 10 years when I was 20. When I was 20, that was half my life. It's now a quarter of my life. So your perception of time and everything changes. And it's something to revisit in the future, all of that. It's a fascinating subject. It really interests me as to how that all sits together. And it kind of, like you said, Ryan, it keeps changing every 10 years or so. It's, culturally, socially, everything's a bit different. I'm just excited to see where that keeps going as well.
It's weird when you start having existential crises when you start thinking of things. But I've worked at my current employer for a fifth of my life, there or thereabouts, and that's mad. Like, it doesn't feel like that long, obviously, but it's mad when you look at it that way.
Yeah, my closing example on time bending, and I will wrap us up. I used to love The Simpsons when I was younger, watch it every day, obsessively. And there was an episode where they're mocking Homer for his old music, and Bart's talking about his dinosaur bands, and it referenced a number of bands from a specific year in the 70s. And there is now a bigger time gap between now and that episode than the time gap discussed in the episode then to Homer's music, which means my music is now older than that dinosaur music, which is just blows my mind when I think about it like that. So good stuff. Thank you, guys. As I say, there's a whole spin-off of that I'd like to revisit in the future, but it's a constant conversation. It just really, really interests me. And of course, there's a selfish bit, but I do hope we stay younger for longer as I tick up the years. Thank you, as always, everyone out there for listening, watching, supporting the show. Follow us on social media. Again, at Listen to IN, Listen TOIN. Once again, I noticed there are a lot of people trawling back through the archive. We really, really appreciate support. If you like what you hear, leave us tags with your favourite shows, post it on the Twitter page, let people know what to look at, tell friends and family, and of course head over to InspirationNation.org.uk for everything with the nation. There is merchandise there. I have somewhere my mug. I'll roll it into the mug shot for the camera. There we go. Face mask, hoodies, t-shirt. Joe's got his hoodie on there. Mine's on the back of the chair over there. I won't show you now, but you saw me wearing it last week. We appreciate all the support. I think all that's left for me to do is count us down, and we'll be back again next week. 3, 2, 1, Inspiration Nation. Catch you guys
later. So I want to know now, what's your biggest takeaway? Don't forget to hashtag it with Inspiration Nation in the comments below, and make sure you commit to action. Thank you for checking it out. So don't forget to catch all our other Inspiration Nation podcast episodes right over here. So go check them out. Also, don't forget to subscribe, because that will tell you when your next video goes live by you hitting that amazing bell. So until next time, it's Inspiration Nation, and I'll see you right over there.